I am hot this morning. I am very hot. Pete Hegseth, who is not a personal friend, though I know him, is going to be an excellent Secretary of Defense, and I have been angry since I saw this sneering online last night. Oh, he's a television host. He's 44 years old. What's Donald Trump's picking his host off to? Pete Hegseth is a decorated combat veteran, 2 Bronze Stars. He's a major. He's a soldier. He deployed 3 times to Iraq and Afghanistan. Twice he earned the Bronze Star. He is the author of this book, among others, The War on Warriors. I interviewed him this summer when it came out, and we'll play that later in the day. Pete Hegseth is not conventional choice, but we don't need a conventional choice. We got to turn the Pentagon upside down, get rid of the DEI, restore our recruitment appeal. We need a warrior leading the warriors. And that's what Pete Hegseth is going to be. And the sneering that is coming from talking heads on X, Jonathan Lemire from MSNBC, Jim Acosta from CNN, all these children of the Beltway bubble and the Manhattan media elite. Well, you know where you can stuff it. The generals, they work for the civilian leadership of the Pentagon. The president-elect won the election. He wants Pete Hegseth, and Pete Hegseth has thought long and hard about this job. May I read you 2 portions of it? Number 1. Learning is a good thing, but intellectualism and intelligence aren't synonymous. You have to be willing to get your hands dirty to translate learning into wisdom. Alexander the Great learned from Aristotle as a boy, but he also led from the front. At the same time, Genghis Khan, the rare uneducated military genius, was able to conquer vast amounts of the known world. And while not a single general working for him had a master's degree or PhD, he didn't have to carry his vaccination card to deploy. We need the Alexanders of the Great studying with Aristotle, or at least that used to be true. I used to think it was a good thing that for decades, almost every senior military officer was encouraged to attend graduate school and an elite university, mostly because civilians might learn something about the military. But the opposite happened. Our military leaders didn't learn real knowledge from civilians. They learned how to think like civilians, and too many of them contracted the woke mind virus. Skipping ahead. What is it about this time in American history that is giving us so many feckless generals? Why would leaders who served honorably for over 30 years now decide to completely abandon all their commitments and previously proclaimed values to be on the right side of a political narrative, or the, quote, right side of history? American history abounds with generals who decided their honor and fidelity was more important than surviving a political storm. They stepped away from their posts rather than retreating from their convictions. The answer is pretty straightforward. Courage is surrendered to safety, merit surrendered to equity, and honor surrendered to ideology. Careers, not the Constitution, are the highest calling of our general class. To save themselves, they must have surrendered our warriors. To save themselves, they have surrendered our warriors. He is the fabulous guy. I'm going to replay the interview about this. So don't put up with this nonsense. From Elizabeth Warren, of all people, a fake Native American, a law professor, telling you that Pete Hegseth can't run the Department of Defense. It's astonishing to me. They want Harold Brown. They want spectacles. Harold Brown did the Last Supper, destroyed the defense industrial base. We need to get ready, get moving, roll out. Other news. John Ratcliffe, CIA. I got to spend a couple of days with John last year. I don't know him well. Former U.S. Attorney, Eastern District of Texas. Former Director of National Intelligence, Congressman. Whip smart. I mean, wicked smart, as they say in Boston. He'll run a great agency. Moreover, the guy shot a 73 and he missed 6 birdie putts. I'm a great caddy, by the way. But John Rick, I've never seen a civilian. I mean, I've seen professional golfers do this. I have never seen a civilian golf like that. Elon Musk is going to join with Vivek Ramaswamy on the Department of Governmental Efficiency. And that, my friends, is a great thing. That is a terrific thing. The Department of Governmental Efficiency is, I think he's left them too much time. To make it work, it's got to be done this year because the recommendations that do have to go into the budget next year so they can be part of the reconciliation. I hope he combines EPA and Interior. I hope they combine a whole bunch of things. Interior is the one I'm waiting for, and education. Interior is the single biggest impediment to economic dynamism and growth in the United States because they hold back commercial, residential, energy developments, data centers with their 404 permits, their Section 7 consultations, their Section 10A permits. When you get Pete Hegseth and whoever's running the Army Corps of Engineers and their 5 senior staff, and you get Elon Musk and Vivek, and you get Lee Zeldin at EPA, and you put them all in a room, and you say, okay, gentlemen, you have 5 weeks to clear your backlog of 404 permits, Section 7 permits, Section 10A permits. You either turn them up, approve them, or you turn them down and you explain to me why, and I might overrule you and approve them. It is time to roll out. Christy Noem at DHS. I don't know Governor Noem except from an interview or two. She's going to be terrific. What really matters there is everybody throws in on the border. Everybody throws in on protecting America from terrorists. We stop hiring an abundance of TSA people to stand around at counters where Americans are not carrying bombs and send them to the border to stop people from entering. Mike Huckabee, Governor Huckabee, the first Governor Huckabee, Governor Huckabee the first, is going to Israel. That's fabulous. I don't know where David Friedman's going. He was a great ambassador, but Governor Huckabee's going to Israel. Bill McGinley, I do not know. White House counsel, I do not know him. I'm sure he's a very tried and tested. That's the president's personal lawyer. I worked in the White House counsel under Reagan, and Fred Fielding was the counsel. Dick Hauser was the deputy counsel. We only had 7 lawyers. You don't need a big White House counsel's office, but you got to have the confidence of the president. Steve Witkoff, I don't know who that is, special envoy to the Middle East, but I'm sure the president has confidence in him. Here's the point. The president-elect is moving out like Patton in terms of these appointments because he sat and he thought and he learned. Now, we don't know the AG yet, and we don't know the Department of Interior yet, and we don't know the Department of Education yet. The AG, I was on with Larry Kudlow yesterday. Let me play the start of that. Does it fit in here? Larry Kudlow. No, it doesn't fit in here. I'll play it a little bit later in the program. Let's start with Larry Kudlow, though. Cut number 6.
So, all right, Hugh, step back for a minute.
Good to see you, Larry.
You've seen the pics. We had a new one today. Mike Huckabee, former governor, Arkansas. He's going to be the ambassador to Israel. Anyway, what do you think of this crop? What do you think so far?
I've been smiling since Tuesday, Larry, because of the relief with Donald Trump's reelection and the greatest comeback in American political history. But with every name, I get happier. Now, I want a full disclosure. My son works for Mike Waltz, who's going to be the new national security advisor. But I would recommend everyone in the audience read his first book, Warrior Diplomat, his brand new book, Hard Truths. He's a realist. He's not eager to get into any wars, but he believes in peace through strength. He's such a smart guy, and he's a Green Beret. I don't know the last time we had a national security or advisor who's been in a gunfight. That's not a qualification per se, but it certainly adds to the gravity of dispatching American troops in harm's way. I think Elise Stefanik is great. I've only met her on the radio, but she is a great Jean Kirkpatrick, Daniel Patrick Moynihan talent level, be able to speak for the West on behalf of the United States. I think Marco Rubio is absolutely, if it is in fact Secretary Rubio, one of the most eloquent and informed and persuasive people out there. When I look at Susie Wiles, I pointed out to people, Donald Trump, Jeb Bush, Rick Scott, and Marco Rubio all like Susie Wiles, so she must be something special. I've only talked to her once. Lee Zeldin, great domestic affairs. I just am impressed with everything that's rolling off the conveyor belt and the orderly speed with which it's advancing. But I really like the national security people. I've got my eye, Larry, I'm sure you do, on justice and defense and treasury, CIA and DNI, because those are our national security things. You know more about the economy. I'm a national security guy. I'm very confident he'll continue to bat 1,000.
You know,
Let's just leave it there. This is the point I want to make. Actually, let's play a little bit of Pete Hegseth at CPAC 21, cut number 11.
People outside these walls, some of the press that are covering this, they don't understand the attachment that conservatives and freedom lovers have to Donald Trump, to the former president. They don't get it. They think it's some sort of a misinformation, cultish thing, cult of personality. Oh, they love the bravado. That's not what it is. I'll explain why we love them in one military analogy. I was a platoon leader in Iraq. I was an infantry platoon leader in the Army. And the one situation you know is the most dangerous situation that you don't want to find your platoon stuck in is what's called a near ambush. So you're walking through a neighborhood and you walk into a near ambush, meaning the enemy has the high ground. They're concealed, and you're stuck in what's called the kill zone on the X, and they've got you pinned down. Rifles, grenades, everything. You're right there in the kill zone. You don't want to be there. You're dead if you're in the kill zone, for the most part, unless you act, okay? The battle drill for being in the kill zone of a near ambush is definitely not crouch down and hope you survive. Because it's never going to happen. Your only option is to immediately seek cover, immediately pop your grenade, throw it, and then charge toward the enemy that you still can't see. That's
That is what Pete Hegseth talks to true. Our recruitment crisis is over. All right, our recruitment crisis is over with Pete. And to the sneering Beltway media elite, shut up. Because you don't know what you're talking about. Matt Continetti is the Washington Free Beacon columnist, AEI scholar, contributor to Commentary Magazine on the podcast most days. He joins me. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm well, Hugh. How are you?
I'm good. I want to talk to you about the national security team that the president-elect is rolling out. I'm going to leave Pete Hegseth for a second. I have to make my disclosure because this will go out on YouTube. My son has worked for Mike Waltz for 4 years and was 4 years in the Trump administration. I got nothing to do with that, but I always disclose my son worked for Michael Waltz. We got Hegseth, Michael Waltz at National Security Advisor, Ratcliffe at the CIA. We've got Elise Stefanik at the UN and Marco Rubio at State. We were waiting on the DNI, the AG, and the FBI. What do you make of the national security team to date?
I think it's very impressive. I think a few things about it. One is, people often label Donald Trump as an isolationist, but anyone who looks at these pics, Hugh, can see that's not what Trump is about. Trump is about what he calls peace through strength. What that means is projecting a very tough image, trying to build deterrence, having a national security team that inspires confidence and boldness, but not engaging in superfluous military interventions, being careful to hold your power in reserve, but being able to intimidate enemies before you actually have to use it. I think that this team that's being built out is exactly fitted for that purpose. One other thing, look at this team. It's good for Israel. It's bad for Iran. It's, I think, good for Taiwan and bad for the Chinese Communist Party. And I also think, in relation to the Ukraine war, it's a team that is retrofitted to say, okay, this is a mess. Biden has created a mess in Ukraine. How do we fix it? How do we get a good solution and end the war? So I'm very pleased with the picks so far, and I think that all of them will be easily confirmed by the Republican Senate.
I'm going to double back with you. I know Ratcliffe a little bit. I know Elise Stefanik on the radio and Senator Rubio in person and on the radio. I'll double back on the one. I know Mike Waltz very well. I want to talk about Pete Hegseth, who I only know from the radio. I think I've met him once or twice, but I have read his book, The War on Warriors, and I interviewed Pete about it. I want to read you something, Matt, and get you to read. This is why I think people are having heart attacks on the left and on X. He writes things like this. The new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the former Air Force Chief of Staff, CQ Charles Brown, could maintain only 7 out of 10 planes as combat ready, but found plenty of time to push a DEI CRT agenda in his branch. CQ happens to be black, which doesn't matter to me one way or another, but means a lot to him, but more on that in a moment. The mighty F-35 was designed to take out Chinese and Russian aircraft before they left the runway. In 2023, the Air Force got a $15 billion upgrade on the F-35, and now leaders are recommending the 5th-generation fighter receive a 6th-generation replacement. But planes need pilots and maintenance, and General Brown had those fighters at 68% readiness for war in 2022. The F-22, the Air Force stealth fighter of the future, stood at 50% readiness under General Brown. With CQ Brown, the Air Force got to celebrate its first minority chief of staff, yet it had places that were not mission capable of defending American-controlled skies. So instead of making soldiers get better at flying airplanes, Secretary of Defense Austin changed the standard for what is considered capable. General Brown quickly claimed it was a, quote, more holistic view of readiness. Holistic, in case you didn't know it, is Latin for BS. And he used the real word. What I think the DEI CRT people are dead in the water at the Pentagon, and I think change is coming to the 5-sided building. What do you think?
Well, I think that the defenders of the Pentagon in recent days, and especially in the hours since Donald Trump nominated Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense, are acting silly. I mean, what they're defending bloat. They're defending a Pentagon that has had trouble meeting its recruitment goals. They're defending a Pentagon that has overseen a deterioration of the international stage like never before. I think this is a very interesting pick, Pete Hegseth. When I look at the team Donald Trump is assembling, a few things stand out, Hugh. One is loyalty, right? Trump wants people that he trusts, and certainly he has a relationship with Hegseth now going back almost a decade. Uh, the second thing is communication skills. All of these people nominated so far are very good at presenting Donald Trump's arguments to the American people via the media. And of course, Pete Hegseth has had a very successful career in media at Fox. But more importantly, when I look at Hegseth, I see somebody, he's obviously an outsider. I mean, he's going to be stepping into a very big role. But he's someone who has spent a lot of time working with the troops. He's not there to impress the general officers. He's not there to impress the bureaucrats at the Pentagon. He's somebody who has had, from his own experience and decades since, real relationships with soldiers. And I think that's going to be a boost in morale. You listen to Hegseth, you listen to him talk about his book, the way he presents himself, all of the work he does with the troops. I think that's going to help the Pentagon reach its recruiting goals. So it's going to be a fight. I have no doubt about that. But I think he's capable. I think the hearings will be something. I'm looking forward to him jousting with the Democrats on Senate Armed Services. But I think in the end, he's going to be there, and he's going to be a disruptor in a good way.
And I want to pick up on that. Before one name came down the trolley, I said, I only have two. I don't care how many women, how many men, how many minorities, what their faith are. I want competence and eloquence. Because I think one of the things I picked up from the commentary podcast is that the president-elect often makes arguments that are difficult for people who are not trained in what he's talking about to understand. And eloquence is about persuading the American people why we have to do things. And if I look at the list, Hegseth, Ratcliffe, Stefanik, Mike Walt, these are eloquent people. They can fashion arguments, and arguments have to be made about why, for example, big armies got to shrink and big navies got to grow, and we have to get submersible, I like to say, ships, satellites, submarines, cyber, and supersonics, hypersonics. We've got to change the Pentagon, top to bottom. And I think disruptor is your word, Matt. Explain what you mean by disruptor for the audience and the Steelers fans who elected Donald Trump.
Well, we know disruptors. I mean, just think about someone like Elon Musk, right? I mean, someone who comes in, innovates, is bold, upsets the status quo. And I think that's what Trump is looking at with Hegseth at the Pentagon. Someone who's loyal, someone who can explain Trump's policies, but someone who is not beholden to this bureaucracy. And Hugh, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you think about the Pentagon, you think about how it has declined in recent years. We spend all this money on defense. What are we getting for it? I mean, the world is not a better place after 4 years of Joe Biden. We're having trouble meeting our recruitment goals. The Pentagon establishment has spent a lot of time and effort on political correctness and DEI and LGBTQ stuff, rather than looking at how to build the most lethal and dominant fighting force. Now, of course, we know that the American fighting man and woman, I mean, they are at the top of their game. And that's why I think you're going to see Hegseth, he's going to appeal to the soldiers. He's not going to necessarily be someone who always gets along with the general staff. But I just learned the other day, we have so many general officers now, and they're competing for bureaucratic territory rather than thinking about how do we make the world a peaceful place and America's fighting force what it once was, which was extremely intimidating and extremely competent. So if Hegseth can do that, I think he'll have a very successful tenure as Secretary of Defense.
Matt, I know you've got military in your family. I've got a son-in-law, and nephew in the military. I hear they don't talk politics with me, but I do want to know about lethality and the deployments that they're on. But I've got a bunch of people who email me. Like right now, the best emailer I have is a major. He might be a lieutenant colonel selected in the Marine Corps. And he just got out of the War College, and he's studying the strategy of the Israeli war in Gaza. He hadn't been studying Lebanon. These people are smart when you get to be field officer rank, major and above. And they're experienced, and they've been shot at. I said on Larry Kudlow yesterday before Pete Hegseth, and again, Mike Waltz is a friend of mine, so you can discount it. My son works for him. It is something, I don't think, it's not in the job description, but to have been in a gunfight and to have killed people and to have rescued people and to have led Afghan troops and our special force, the Green Beret, that's not in the job description, but it sure is going to make you hesitant to send Americans to be sitting ducks in Beirut or any other place. You're going to want to win the war the way we used to win the war, which is fast and get out. I'm just thrilled with this team. And I hope, again, the hardest job, and this is what I want to talk to you next, is the Attorney General. But any closing thought on Elise Stefanik at the UN?
Oh, only that I'm making the popcorn because, Elise Stefanik is in a long line of UN ambassadors who Republicans appoint to go there and to get that place in shape and to make the arguments defending America, defending the West, and defending the state of Israel. If Elise Stefanik brings a tenth of what she brought to that hearing with the college presidents on anti-Semitism to the UN, that place will be rocked. And I can't wait to see it, Hugh.
Yeah, Moynihan, Kirkpatrick, and I think we're going to be adding Stefanik to that. Nikki Haley did a fine job, but she was not blistering people. And we need people. There wasn't an Israel-Iran war underway. I want to turn to Attorney General. I'm a alum of the Department of Justice. I worked for Bill Smith and Ed Meese 1,000 years ago. A flamethrower has to be taken to the place to melt the resistance out of the wall, Matt. And I mean, not only every assistant attorney general, but every deputy assistant attorney general, every supervisor, everyone who had anything to do with Jack Smith, the weaponization of everything, the plea deal for Hunter Biden. It's just corrupt at the leadership level. I don't know who Donald Trump, I wanted Ratcliffe to take that job because he's a tough son of a gun. What do you think about finding an AG? We got a minute and I want to keep you for the break.
Well, I think it's going to be a similar pick to what we're seeing. Someone who's loyal to Trump, someone who is good on television, and someone who understands exactly what you said, Hugh. The resistance is getting back together. And I think two of the bureaucratic locations of it in this next Trump administration will be one, the Pentagon, and two, DOJ. And you already see preparations being made. So whoever gets that job is going to not only have to enforce the rule of law more broadly in the United States, but they're also going to have to enforce the rule of law in the Justice Department. So you want someone who's impressive and competent, and we'll wait and see who that is.
From 1989 to 2016, I was a lawyer in private practice representing landowners who needed to develop land for houses, for commercial buildings, for government projects. The biggest impediment to land development in the federal government is the Department of the Interior, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a blob that gives permits or don't give permits or lose your file, etc. Do you think Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Lee Zeldin, Pete Hegseth, and whoever he puts in at the Corps, and whoever becomes the Department of Interior, can actually unleash American productivity? Because home building is our new car company. Used to be car building was what employed Americans. Every new house is 4 jobs on site and 10 jobs downstream. And that's not big buildings or roads. It's this bureaucracy that stops growth. Are you an optimist?
I think it could be done. I think it's going to be tough. I think having Elon Musk involved in the administration may be the difference maker between Trump 1 and Trump 2. I mean, it's fascinating to see how Musk is involved in these decisions, Hugh, and this announcement yesterday that he and Vivek are going to be in the endeavor of the Department of Government Efficiency. I don't know if it's going to be an actual department, but two of them, that's a department, right? And certainly what you say about the Department of Interior rings true to me, Hugh. I'm going to make a confession to you. One of my first summer jobs was at the Department of Interior in Washington, D.C. I'm a Beltway boy. So I have had experience in the belly of the beast. And let me tell you, that place, it can lose some bureaucratic weight. I can tell you that from a personal experience.
You can cut it in half. You can fire
Easily.
Everyone at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the species will be better.
That'd be fine.
It's just that it's dysfunctional. It doesn't do its job. I can't tell you how many times I would keep 2 copies of every file because I'd send it into the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It would be lost. And they go, we can't find it. I said, here it is. It's literally the worst place I've ever had to deal with, other than the California Coastal Commission. California Coastal Commission
as
is
they say,
abandoned hope.
good enough for government work. That's what that was.
And it wasn't.
It
wasn't
no,
good
right.
enough for government.
It was worse. Yeah.
So the question is, the thing that the president-elect said, they have to be done by mid-2026. And that's not soon enough, because you get 2 reconciliations, then we're going to lose the Congress. Because we're going to get whacked in 2026. That's just the cycle of American politics. You get 2 reconciliations. So if you want to combine and shrink the government agencies, you got to get into the second reconciliation, which will be due in February and March of next year. Do you think they can move that fast?
Well, Congress will try, and of course there are a lot of incumbent interests in Congress. But I'm looking at the executive branch, Hugh. It's been undercovered, but I do think Trump is going to try some old techniques to kind of cut down on the bureaucracy. Things like impoundment, things like rearranging the bureaucratic map, moving agencies, maybe closing down some programs that he can do through executive power. So I think what we'll see in the end of 2 years, if this is a success, is a federal government that looks different than the one that Donald Trump enters into office with. And let's not forget, too, we're hearing all these stories in the Washington Post and elsewhere, Beltway media, about how the bureaucrats in the administrative state are terrified of Trump and they're planning to retire or find other jobs. Of course, I hear that and I say, good, and I think that will actually be something that will help achieve the goals that Musk and Trump are setting out for themselves.
Well said. Matt Continetti, I look forward to the commentary pod today. Follow him on X at Continetti. Read him in the Washington Free Beacon. Follow his work at the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you, Matt. Mary Catherine Ham is host of Getting Hammered podcast. Vic Mattis joins her there as well. Mary Catherine, I have been running down with Matt Continetti and in my monologue, Pete Hegseth, John Ratcliffe, Michael Waltz, Elise Stefanik, Marco Rubio. I'm thrilled. But the left has decided Pete Hegseth is too young and he works for Fox News, so he's got to go. Got 2 Bronze Stars from 3 combat deployments. And he's written this book, The War on Warriors, which is a very good book. What do you think?
First of all, it's exciting because I didn't think I would be friends and peers with a Secretary of Defense. The other part is that, look, I think they always go too far with this stuff, right? Because he is an unexpected pick, and because he hosts a morning show, they're like, oh, well, this is why Trump picked him. Look at this. This is pathetic. He's clearly not qualified. We've created a generation of warriors who have been in combat for extended periods of time, who know quite a bit about what this looks like, he's been in activism for vets since 2006. He went to Princeton and Harvard. This is a guy who knows a little bit about what this job entails. And I do want to say that in 2006, I think I was one of Pete Hegseth's first media hits because I covered Vets for Freedom at a rally on my Ham Nation weekly YouTube show. And Baby Hegseth and Baby MKH did a little interview together way back in the day.
I like to point out to people, and I'm not comparing individuals, I'm comparing chronological age. Winston Churchill was 40 when he was at the Admiralty in World War I, and people say, well, look at Gallipoli. Gallipoli was actually a genius move, and had it been executed, it would have worked. And Grant was under 44 when he took Vicksburg and took over the Army of the Potomac. Chronological age has nothing to do with leadership, although you've got to have a few decades at it. I don't know him well, but he's very, very smart. What are they afraid of?
I think they might be afraid of the idea that if there's a guy who can root out some of the more problematic woke issues inside the military, which there are these things that have been implemented, that he might be dedicated to doing that, and that it might make other people who have gained footing by implementing these things not necessary anymore. But I think my one concern would be, has he run a large organization before? But he's also been a platoon leader, right? So this is what military service trains you for, to some degree, is to be a leader. So I'm interested to see what happens here with confirmation and to hear from him.
Yeah, and he needs to pick an undersecretary, he needs a DepSec, and he needs for inside work, and he needs to serve as secretaries and a bunch of, there are a lot of people to help him run that. I want to quickly get your reaction to Elise Stefanik and Marco Rubio, Mary Catherine Ham.
Again, if you had told me 10 years ago that there would be an administration coming in with Marco Rubio at state and Elise Stefanik going to UN, I'd be like, is Guy Benson the president? What?
Guy Benson might be the press secretary. You might be the
Right.
press secretary. I'm not putting anything over on this.
So I'm excited about it. Look, I think Elise Stefanik has shown that she has exactly the qualification to go to the UN, which is be a powerful voice for the Jewish people to slam anti-Semites and put them in their place. And it's just a bonus that she's a smart lady to do it, because a lot of countries that are at the UN and are anti-Semitic don't appreciate that. And that's basically the whole job at the UN at this point. We're not getting anything out of these folks. And so I look forward to her doing that vociferously and energetically. And then Rubio is just a smart guy who understands world affairs, who I think, because of his Cuban origin, has connections to Latin America that will keep that sort of on a front burner. We will be dealing with those issues, I think, probably more openly, and it's going to be fun to watch them work.
Now, I mentioned to everyone, Mike Waltz is my friend. My son works for Michael Waltz. He's brilliant. I don't have to debate that with anyone. What about, where's Rick Grinnell going to end up? Because, I mean, he's a go-to guy for if he ends up at the FBI, they're going to have a heart attack at that building. What do you think?
Ooh, yeah, I'm the FBI opening is going to be interesting.
He ran DNI. Remember, he ran DNI.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. No, I'm excited to see where Rick ends up. I think certainly he'll end up somewhere interesting, and he will not be afraid to do battle wherever he ends up. The thing is too, like, the press is going to freak out and say that all of this is unconventional and oh so bad, but a lot of people voted for change, guys, and unconventional doesn't mean bad to them. In fact, the status quo meant bad to them. So if you can do it
Because Joe
responsibly,
Biden is infirm, and Lloyd Austin didn't tell us when he went to the hospital for 2 weeks. I mean, this is not like we're switching out a bunch of rookies for the All-Star, the 27 Yankees. Last minute to you, Mary Catherine.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The Austin thing in particular, it's real nerve to say that Pete Hegseth is unqualified after Austin has like caused real problems just being MIA for parts of his job. And the current president is MIA doing battle with the sand in Delaware, trying to walk down the beach. So I just think normal people, as usual, who are not the press, look at these changes and go, well, I can't keep track of this cast of characters, but it all looks like it's proceeding fine. That is one thing I will say for this transition. Good job, Susie Wiles. This is going quickly and smoothly, and it feels like people are making progress and getting in the spots they need to be in. People feel good about that.
I am absolutely with you, Mary Catherine Ham. Akash Chogali, Americans for Prosperity Vice President. AFP is, of course, a great sponsor of my program, and I have not talked to Akash. I'm going to have lunch with him today, but I have not talked to Akash since the election. Akash, how you feeling, my friend? Uh-oh.
I know you had a fun few weeks here.
Akash, we're having trouble with your signal. I think we're going to hang up and call you again. And, yeah, we're going to disconnect that and call it back. Okay. Akash, how you feeling about the election and the aftermath?
I am feeling great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm feeling great. Obviously, a surprise as far as the scale of the sweeping victory. And I think, what's important is that Election Day was the beginning, not the end, right? We have to hit the ground running these first 100 days, get people in place, start cutting regulations, start working on the tax bill, and, secure the border, start fixing the problems this last administration has created.
Now, Akash, we do not have a Secretary of the Treasury yet. We've got Lee Zeldin at EPA, which is that's a domestic policy choice. We got Susie Wiles as Chief of Staff. Almost everyone else is the national security team. I'm thrilled. I'm over the moon. Do you have any a reaction to Rubio at State or Pete Hegseth at Defense or Michael Waltz, who's a friend at National Security Council, or John Ratcliffe at CIA, Elise Stefanik at the UN?
Yeah, these are great picks. I think there were a lot of questions last time Trump came in about who he was picking and why, but these are great picks that I think are striking a balance with the variety of beliefs within the Republican Party, as we talked about in the past year. I think so far, so good. We'll look to see what some of these more domestic economic picks look like. Very encouraging. I think the one thing we've got to keep in mind is that we have very narrow majorities in the Senate and the House. So chipping away at Congress for these nominees may not be the best idea as far as making sure we have policy majorities over there. But substantively, these are great picks by the president to hit the ground running.
It looks like 223, which after Stefanik and Walz leave will be at 221, and they will need discipline to pass a budget. The budget allows the reconciliation bills to proceed. That includes extending and making permanent the Trump tax cuts. Is American for Prosperity deeply involved in the tax extension and revision?
Absolutely, Hugh. By December, we will have done 1,000 meetings on Capitol Hill, more than 200 member meetings, up and down the conference, from the Speaker's office to incoming freshmen. Our team will actually be flying out to meet with newly elected Republicans before the end of the year to talk about our priorities, the principles, what pro-growth tax policy looks like. And look, that's exactly our goal, is the most pro-growth tax package with the most constructive policy reforms that we can possibly get past Senate rules, get through both chambers of Congress, and signed by the president. Now, that's a heavy lift. For that reason, we'd rather do it right than do it fast, but we are heavily engaged in it, and we're very excited about working with Speaker Johnson, the new Senate Majority Leader, and the White House to get this done.
No, Akash, I've told people, and it's not because AFP is my sponsor, it's because I did events with AFP in Ohio and Pennsylvania. I credit AFP with the election of Bernie Moreno. When it's close, everybody matters, right? Everybody matters when it's close. Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, Tim Shea in Montana wasn't close, but you were on the ground in all three of those races. Is AFP going forward? I mean, I always tell people, americansforprosperity.org/volunteer, americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Is it rolling out? Are you missing a step?
No, well, we are hitting the ground running. As I mentioned, Election Day was the beginning, not the end. We were proud to support those great candidates with AFP Action. We knocked more than $1 million in Pennsylvania, $1 million in Ohio, more than 2.5 million total voter contacts in Pennsylvania, more than 2 million in Ohio. These razor-thin margins, every vote, every door, every conversation matter. We were proud to support policy champions, and we want to make sure that they deliver on the promises they've made, and we can help them do so at AFP. And frankly, your listeners can help us help them do so by signing up as activists with us today.
Now, Akash, would you try and do tutorial 101 for the Steelers fans? And I love the Steelers fans. They elected Dave McCormick. I love you, Steelers fans. Would you explain budget and reconciliation to them?
Yeah, so basically, the Senate generally needs 60 votes to pass legislation, a two-thirds majority. That was by design for our founders so that Congress didn't act too irrationally. But there's one exception to that, which is budget reconciliation can be passed with a simple majority, but the provisions must be budgetary in nature. You can't do sweeping policy change that has nothing to do with the federal budget. But tax and spending bills can pass through the Senate with 51 votes. Both chambers agree on what's called a budget resolution, which has a top-line dollar figure, some high-level instructions for committees, and then they go forward from there, constructing the legislation. And so the first step in January will be agreeing on that budget resolution, the deficit impact, and then from there, they've worked on the details of the tax package, get it through the House, and they can pass it through the Senate with 51 votes. We have a very, very narrow cushion. So it'll be interesting to see what Republicans can agree on. But we are very, very encouraged with what Speaker Johnson has been talking about, Majority Leader Scalise and others have been working on throughout this year to get that done, extend those Trump tax cuts, and go even further to make policy reforms where we can under those Senate rules.
Now, because my understanding, it's really up to the Senate parliamentarian, is whether or not a reconciliation feature meets the definition of an impact on taxing and spending. I believe, for example, that federal dollars to state education systems can be conditioned on those states adopting a school choice program. I believe NPR can be zeroed out for federal subsidy. I believe Corporation for Public Broadcasting can be zeroed out for federal subsidy. I believe there are a lot of agencies you can consolidate if you can show a budgetary impact. And I really believe that RIF authority can be made explicit so that the new Department on Government Efficiency, headed by Musk and Vivek, can be empowered to cut and combine agencies. Do you agree with my rather expansive view of what reconciliation allows?
I do, Hugh, but it's an open question. People were a little bit surprised. If you remember back in 2017, the parliamentarians allowed the expanded drilling in Alaska
Yep.
because even though that wasn't a tax and budget policy change, it had major revenue implications. There was an enormous influx of government revenue because of the increased energy development and economic activity that came from that. And so I think there is quite a bit more than we think can be done on energy policy, on border security, certainly on reforming the federal government, reforming the federal workforce and things like that. Those are budgetary in nature. And so I think that's why the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and others are being so aggressive, asking for policy change ideas, higher education savings, you name it, in addition to tax cuts. And I think that's what we want to do. We want to take the biggest, boldest package we can pass through the House, see what the parliamentarian says, and then go from there. There's no need to debate amongst ourselves about what the parliamentarian will or won't allow. Let's get broad-based agreement on the mandate that the American people just delivered to Republicans last week and go from there. Look, we talked to more than 19 million people this election cycle, between doors, phone calls, and you name it. Over and over again, the economy and inflation and the border were the top issues that we heard about. We think all of those things can be addressed through the reconciliation package, and that's what Republicans are prioritizing on and doing.
One last idea for you, Akash, because I know you're deep into policy. Wait, small modular reactors are safe, reliable, and they are the power for AI and supercomputing that we need. I believe reconciliation can authorize, notwithstanding any other law, the construction of SMRs wherever the DOE wants it. And that if we get revenue from those SMRs, if every kilowatt of energy that comes out of SMR yields some minuscule amount of tax to the federal government, it could be magnificent for everyone. It's like printing real money, not printing fake money. But if you produce energy, energy is freedom. Have you got anyone studying up on small modular reactors and authorizing their construction?
Yeah, we actually have several people working on energy issues. I don't know the details of that particular topic, but absolutely, we're very, very focused. As I mentioned, I think despite the rules around reconciliation, energy is one of the policy areas that we can make the greatest impact because exactly what you said, these policy changes have enormous impact on government revenue because of what they do to the economy. Obviously, more economic activity means more government revenue. And so we're very, very bullish on the kind of energy reforms that can be included. We'll continue to look into that issue, Hugh, and I appreciate you flagging that. But at a high level, I would urge your listeners to be active with their members of Congress, of course, work with AFP, and tell them to be bold on exactly those kinds of issues when it comes to energy to help reduce costs and juice economic activity through this tax reconciliation package.
Exactly. Go far, go fast, and go with AFP. AmericansForProsperity.org/volunteer. Akash, great to talk to you. I'll see you at lunch, and look forward to catching up on how you guys are blitzing the Hill, because the AFP team, they're just second to none in terms of advocating for growth, growth, growth. Energy is freedom. Growth, growth, growth is what America needs. We've got a huge debt, and the way to get out of the debt is to produce more energy, lowers the cost of production for things like food and everything else you buy, and produces revenue for the federal treasury. It's the way. That is the way. Olivia Beavers covers the Congress for Politico. Good morning, Olivia. My count is the Republicans are going to have 223 because I think Michelle Steele, John Duarte in Fresno, and Mr. Begich in Alaska are going to win. Are you on my calculation metric there at 223?
I mean, I think that that's what Republicans are banking on, and they've been watching those races and are expecting those members to survive from our conversations about it. And I think that Decision Desk also has officially called the House majority in favor of Republicans, but we're still waiting for the Associated Press. My outlet waits for the Associated Press to make that call before we can release, stories about who has control of a chamber. But today is going to be a very busy day where, whether or not they have the official call from the AP or not, Republicans are going to enter a closed room for multiple hours and pick their leadership. And this is going to come after they meet with Donald Trump earlier in the morning. And so I think you're going to see not only them hearing from the incoming president about his vision, but also then hearing members pitch themselves about why they should be in a various leadership position. Mike Johnson right now is looking like he will be running unopposed despite this sort of last minute will they, won't they from House conservatives. Steve Scalise and Tom Emmer also don't look like they will have any challengers, but the one fun race that we get to watch is the race to replace Elise Stefanik as conference chair. So you have two strong conservative women who are running for that position, Kat Cammack from Florida and Lisa McClain from Michigan.
Now, Olivia, over on the other side, the Senate Majority
Mhm.
Leader race is underway, and it's
Yes.
I want to do it in order. Senator Cornyn, Senator Scott, Senator Thune, they're all friends of mine, friends of the program. We'll be fine no matter who wins. I think Tom Cotton and Mike Barrasso have walked up number 3 and number 2, respectively. Any news on any? Do you have a guess on the Senate Majority Leader? I don't, because it's a secret ballot. Nobody knows.
It's a secret ballot, and there's been sort of an interesting development on that front, and I'll get to it. But I think the common thinking is that Thune might have a slight edge in this race, at least from what my colleague and others have heard. But Scott is running sort of with this online pressure campaign to get different senators to support him, and he has the backing of different powerful Trump allies and sort of the conservative, more MAGA members of the Senate. And there are enough senators who are publicly speaking out saying like, hey, we don't need Donald Trump weighing in on this race. We want this to be decided internally. But there is some belief that there is a possibility that if Rick Scott drops out, his votes will go to Cornyn. So it's not a race that's going to be easy to predict and call. And a lot of senators are not saying how they plan to vote. They don't want to be out there publicly if their vote doesn't go their way. But they also want to have a little bit of, I guess, some privacy in case that is not someone that Donald Trump wants to be leader. Thune, I think, has had a little bit more of a rockier relationship with Donald Trump and has been more critical. Cornyn has had his moments, and then I think you could make the case that Scott is definitely the closest to Trump out of the three.
But yeah, the former and future president has not said anything publicly. And I had Senator Scott on the program yesterday. I've had Senator Thune on in the race. Senator Cornyn's a good friend of the program. I honestly have no idea because the dominoes fall for so many people. The self-interest is in one person advancing and the other person not, because different committees go different ways depending on who ends up where. It's really almost impossible to tell. And I don't try because I'm not a senator, and I've been to the conference a couple of times to
How
talk
are you
to him.
trying to make me do that then, Hugh?
Yeah, because you're a reporter, and I know these guys, and I don't want to. I love them all; they're good friends. Olivia, to me, the most important thing is getting the nominations done and getting the budget reconciliation done within 100 days. Is there a plan to get the budget reconciliation done? I know there's a plan on the nominees. Is there a plan on the budget reconciliation?
I think that that's definitely something that Republicans are looking to do. And I mean, Scalise put out his 100-day plan and was talking about budget reconciliation. There's a huge, I think, eagerness to move on the budget. Donald Trump is coming in. There's talks about what government funding is going to look like and how long and through what month they should do a CR before Donald Trump has to deal with it again. And so I do think that there are definitely discussions about reconciliation. And I think that there's even meetings happening this week. I don't remember when they were happening. My head's been a little bit in the leadership land, but I believe that those are definitely underway.
Yeah, and I think the president-elect is going to be a wonderfully cohesive impact, at least for 6 months, for the nominees and for the budget reconciliation, because the extension and hopefully making permanent the Trump tax cuts, the revisions on SALT, the revisions on tax on tips, that all requires a budget first. And they're going to spend some money just like Joe Biden did. And then they're going to grow our way out of this debt and deficit. I want to begin by telling you, pay no attention to the Houthis and their propagandas. They fired on a couple of our destroyers last night, and they're claiming direct hits on the aircraft carrier, the Lincoln and the Spruance, and I can't remember the third one that they shot at. Nothing hit anything, but they continue to fire on our ships. I'm reading from the defensemirror.com this morning. The U.S. Navy and Air Force responded with several overnight strikes on Tuesday against Houthi weapons storage facilities in western Yemen with F-35C multi-role stealth strike aircraft seeing its combat debut as Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 314, VMFA 314, stationed aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, that's in the Gulf right now, participating in the strikes. According to the Pentagon on Monday, the U.S. destroyers Stockdale and Spruance were targeted near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait by Yemeni forces using drones and various anti-ship missiles, which were intercepted by the destroyer's Aegis defense system. No damage or injuries were reported in response. The U.S. Navy and Air Force conducted retaliatory strikes on Houthi weapons storage facilities in western Yemen, with Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 314 participating in these operations from the USS Abraham Lincoln. Deterrence has failed. Right, this ragtag band of terrorists armed with Iranian weapons are shooting at our sailors weekly. And we have to stop that. We have to stop it. The Israelis know what deterrence is. Right? The Israelis know the mothership is in Tehran. And they airmailed their response the last time. There had been another one from Iran. And we keep hitting the Yemeni weapons depots, which is fine. I'm sure the Air Force and the Navy are doing exactly what the Pentagon is ordering them. So people want to tell me that Pete Hegseth isn't qualified to replace Lloyd Austin. I am just interested in warfighters who will bring the hammer down on people who threaten our men and women in uniform. And God bless Secretary Austin and everybody else. God bless Joe Biden. God bless the Central Command commander, whoever it is. He's doing a good job. It's I can't remember. They've been in Israel a couple of times, coordinating the defense of Israeli airspaces. But this cannot go on. Our ships are just out there not deterring because their rules of their engagement are to respond and intercept. And it's time to sink the Iranian spy ships. It's time to sink their fleet. Iran knows we've got their number and their email address, and Donald Trump is coming. And Pete Hegseth is coming, and Michael Waltz is coming, and they understand deterrence. And this has got to stop. It's just got to stop. And I want to go back to Andrew McCarthy, who was on with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino. I think I'm joining Bill and Dana this morning after my program, talking about the left talking about a convicted felon. And I'm glad Andy made this point. Cut number 7.
Yeah, I just think one point that we're missing here is that Trump is not a convicted felon. Technically, a judgment of conviction is not entered until he's sentenced. And I think one of the reasons that they asked for the delay in the first place is they're hoping to get the case thrown out by Merchan without ever having a judgment of conviction entered. The whole point of the motion to dismiss or the motion to vacate the convictions was that he never become a convicted felon in the first place. And as long as this is frozen, technically he's not a convicted felon, even though, rhetorically he's addressed that way.
Thank you, Andrew McCarthy.
Hi, I'm from Chicago.
And Merchan, I have no hope that he won't.
Oklahoma.
I think he's going to be reversed on
And I'm
appeal.
from
Everybody
San
knows
Ynez
that's a joke
Valley
case.
in Central California.
But he's not a convicted felon. And when Merchan makes him a convicted felon, he will go down in infamy as a idiot. David Folkenfeld is a very fine man on the left. I like NPR. I really do. I like NPR. I don't want him to get a dime. But this is chutzpah. Cut number 3.
I mean, what's impressive in some ways is the way in which conservative forces have created this alternative media ecosphere that is, in a sense, the mirror image of the, what shall we say, caricature of the legacy and mainstream media that they've presented for all these decades, right? It is much of it intently created and aimed at propping up conservative forces, knocking down liberal either talking points or agendas, and discrediting them in the process in a way that the mainstream media doesn't really think of its motivation. It's not why people at the Washington Post get out of bed to report. It's not why people at Axios go and call sources. But this is what they've created. I do also think, you call it the manosphere. I was toying around this weekend. Is it sort of the Broseph podcast ecosystem? What's the right term for it? But, those...
Stop for a sec. Mary Catherine Ham. Oh, you bet. Eliana Johnson. You bet. Christine Rosen. That's the manosphere. What utter propaganda nonsense. And David, get some self-awareness. You're a fine guy. You've been doing left-wing reporting forever. NPR is a government-funded branch of the Democratic Party. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is a Democrat Congress-funded arm of the Democratic Party, and they both should be defunded. MSNBC can go on their merry way, losing audience. CNN's ratings are next to nothing. Fox is growing because they're fair and balanced and unafraid. I've been doing this for 25 years. And I don't care whether you're black, white, which gender you are. I don't care what your ethnicity is. If you're interested, you're on this show, and I'm talking to you about what's going on in the news. And the idea that an NPR sinecurist goes and talks to Stephanie Ruhle, who got one of the softball interviews with Kamala Harris that sunk her campaign. And The View, I mean, with this alternative media stuff, the guy, Frank Bruni, spoke truth here. MSNBC on Frank Bruni, cut number 4.
For sure. I mean, I think all of us have to come to grips with legacy media is just not as important as it
Bruni,
is.
that is Jim Vandehei, but that's fine. Let's listen to Jim Vandehei, one of the founders of Axios, and before that, Politico. Cut number 4.
It is to you, it is to me. That's a relatively small group of people who rely on us for their information. And you have to go into the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. And basically, the way people get information is shattered into 20, 30 different pieces. And so if you just look empirically at the numbers, Joe Rogan's more important than any of us. He just has a much bigger, hyper-connected audience.
Jim, and you know who else is more important than any of us? Any of us means Beltway, Manhattan, legacy media. I'm in the Beltway. I'm in my Relief Factor studio in the Beltway. I also get out of the Beltway an awful lot. Right? I'm a Virginian, but I go to California to teach. I go to Maine to relax. I spend the summer in Maine. I do not stay in the Beltway because the Beltway is sick. I don't read Axios. I don't read Politico. I don't read Semaphore because that is the narrative curated by left-wingers. And Politico's gone so far left. Now, Olivia Beaver is a fine reporter. I trust Olivia. They have good reporters, a few, at all these different places. But the gossip sheets inside the Beltway are poisonous. Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, their reporting staff are all left-wing. Editorial staff at the Wall Street Journal is center-right, for a classic Reagan conservative like me. I am sick of people talking about the alternative ecosphere. Rush built the mall. I've just got a storefront in it. Mark Levin's got a storefront in it. Mike Gallagher, Seb Gorka, Charlie Kirk. New voices have arisen in response to the utter failure of CNN. And everything else, MSNBC. Scott Jennings with Abby Phillip last night. God bless Scott Jennings. A lot of people want him to be the press secretary. I don't know if that I want him to leave CNN. Cut number 5.
Does anyone have confidence in the current leadership of the Pentagon and the way the defense situation has been operating for the last several years? I mean, from the Afghanistan pullout, which was an extreme debacle for which no one was held accountable. We've had spy balloons flying over the United States. We built a $300 million pier as a public relations stunt, which wound up killing an American service member. I'd say I've had just about enough of the so-called insiders running the Defense Department. I think we ought to give Pete Hegseth a chance because he's got two insiders. All the criticism of him is that he's not the expected Washington pick, and I'm just saying to you that the American people just voted against the expected Washington pick. So he's got
Scott Jennings and Carl Bernstein. Gosh, man, retire. Really, retire. And CNN, you're never going to get your ratings back unless you find 5 more Scott Jennings. And I am telling you all, listen to me, listen to Highly Concentrated You and Dwayne's World. But you got to listen to the Ruthless podcast. You got to listen to the editors. You got to listen to Commentary, a podcast. You've got to listen to Getting Hammered. Got to listen to Call Me Back with Dan Senor. That's what they're talking about. And Joe Rogan, if that's your thing, I think Joe's a fine interviewer, but he doesn't do national security or in-depth policy because that's not who he is. And that's fine. It's not alternative. It's new. And you're broken. And you haven't fixed anything in 20 years. And now you're irrelevant. And you're losing money by the bucket. I'm not losing money. I've got greater revenue than ever. And I've been doing the same thing for 25 years. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not going anywhere for at least 4 years, maybe up to 8. But eventually I'll retire. But by that point, Ruthless and Vic Mattis and Mary Catherine Ham and the editors, they're all grown up. And they're all getting big. And they're going to obliterate broadcast except for Fox News. I got lots of friends at the Pentagon. Lots of friends at the Pentagon. And a couple of texts this morning, there are a lot of dedicated people at the Pentagon. Absolutely, there are. Absolutely. And there are people who served in uniform and then have come back, and we cannot defend the country without them. There are a lot of parts of the Pentagon that are going to go away, the DEI, the CRT. I think the academies are going to get overhauled under Pete Hegseth, and it's very unnerving for general officers to be in the chain of command to a major, and very unnerving. But John Lehman was a young man when he built Reagan's Navy, and Churchill was a young man when he did every job in the First World War and then every job, including Prime Minister, in the Second World War. Older than Pete. I'm just saying, civilian leadership is good for the Pentagon. There are a bunch of other people that are coming in. Pete Hegseth is competent and eloquent. And the knee-jerk reaction. In fact, I want to go back to the full saying that Scott Jennings said last night, cut number 5.
Does anyone have confidence in the current leadership of the Pentagon and the way the defense situation has been operating for the last several years? I mean, from the Afghanistan pullout, which was an extreme debacle for which no one was held accountable. We've had spy balloons flying over the United States. We built a $300 million pier as a public relations stunt, which wound up killing an American service member. I'd say I've had just about enough of the so-called insiders running the Defense Department. I think we ought to give Pete Hegseth a chance because he's got two insiders. All the criticism of him is that he's not the expected Washington pick. And I'm just saying to you that the American people just voted against the expected Washington pick. So he's got 20 years in service, Afghanistan, Iraq, 2 Bronze Stars, Princeton, Harvard. Yeah, he's on TV, but so are the rest of us.
By the way, that list
I think he ought to be given a chance.
That list you just gave is really interesting because you highlighted a bunch of things that the civilian leadership of the country decided on. In the military, their job was just to execute. They execute.
How did it go?
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
How did it go?
In terms of the decision making, you're assigning decision making responsibility to the military over things that civilians were responsible for.
So you make a good point. The civilian leadership made decisions, and then the people they put in charge of the Pentagon carried it out, and it was all pretty much a disaster. So now we have a new president who I think got elected in part because of some of those disasters, and he's going to put in some of the non-insiders in charge of not just this agency, but a bunch of them. Now, look, they've got to perform. They've got to perform. I mean, we got 53 U.S. senators that are Republicans, and Pete Hegseth, he's an American hero. The man won 2 Bronze Stars for his service, and he's been a champion for veterans. He's going to have to go up there just like everybody else and prove his knowledge of how to do this job. He's not immune from that, but we ought to give this man a chance, in my opinion.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Coming up, I'm going to spend a few minutes with Todd Komarnicki, who's the director of a movie, Bonhoeffer, that a few people are going to have to watch to understand who Bonhoeffer was and what they're going to be doing. And I really want to recommend this movie to you in the interview coming up. I'll take her 6 or 7 minutes with him to do that, and then I'll come back and talk about other things. But I do want to give the movie a plug because courage is always needed. Bonhoeffer had the greatest kind. No greater love of the man that he laid down his life for his friend. And Bonhoeffer did that. And a lot of Americans have done that, and others put their lives on the line, like Pete Hegseth. And the table warriors of Washington ragging on Pete Hegseth, boy, that makes me mad. He's got hearings coming up. He'll go through them. There are a bunch of other people going, the Pentagon deputy, undersecretary for policy, the service chief. There are a lot of other people going there. But the left wing, Jim Acosta's arguing he's a TV host. Shame on you. Just absolute shame on you. People turn off their show, don't listen to them. Next week, an important movie debuts across the United States, Bonhoeffer. I'm so pleased to welcome its director right now, Todd Komarnicki. Todd, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. You're a hero to be looking so good at this hour.
This is my job.
And that this was all they were able to whip together. So sorry about that.
Todd, this has got nothing to do with Bonhoeffer, but I want to ask, what is the earliest shoots you have to do for a movie like that? Aren't you out in the middle of the night roaming different locations, living the night owl's life?
I hope that when people watch the movie, they can feel the actual cold of the forest We shot this movie in the dead of winter in Northern Europe. And
Ooh.
yeah, I'm still chilly from the experience.
Well, tell people about Bonhoeffer. It opens next week. It's in a couple of theaters in the Beltway. I'm assuming it's a coast-to-coast release from Angel Studios, great sponsor of our show, and I always love it. I don't always accept some of their movies, but I love Bonhoeffer. Tell us about this film and why you chose to make it.
Well, I feel like I was sort of grabbed to make it. His story, once you encounter it, really reshapes the way you see the world. And it's the true story of a pacifist pastor who became one of the assassins of Hitler, and in between saved thousands of Jewish lives. He was the first and clarion voice to stand out against Hitler, all the way back as early as 1933. And one of the reasons I think this movie is so important is that in America, and this is nobody's fault, but in America, we tend to learn in school about everything in World War II from the time we got involved. And 1933 and what's happening in the early days of Hitler's rise is either skipped over or not focused on at all. This movie peels back the layers and shows that the first thing that Hitler did when he came to power, because he had limited power within the Politburo, was that he went after the church. And when he tried to put himself as the head of the church, there was this young pastor, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who stood up and said, "This cannot stand." And he put himself literally in the way. Like, I often think of the extraordinary image from Tiananmen Square where the young man stands in front of the tank and the tank tries to get by and he doesn't move. And finally, he even climbs up and knocks on the top of the tank to say to the soldier, "What are you doing? We're both human beings." And Bonhoeffer did absolutely the same thing.
Now, Todd, I want people to know, because of Eric McTaxis's wonderful biography of Bonhoeffer, I know about the struggle he had when he was in New York and safe. He was safe in New York, and he chose to go back to Germany, knew what he was going into. Does that get covered in the movie? I didn't watch the trailer because I want to see it on the big screen. Do you cover that decision? Okay, I'm going back, and it's going to be hard.
100%. And you know what's even more interesting? This little tidbit is not in the movie, but he was in correspondence through Bishop Bell with Mahatma Gandhi. He wrote letters with Gandhi, invited him to come stay and live with him. This is at the beginning of his journey, and he knew that Germany was sort of teetering on the edge of disaster. And the only reason he didn't go is because of this very reason. He felt, how can I abandon my country when it's in trouble? And so years later, when it was a life and death issue for him, he still left New York and went back to Germany. He always went into the headwind when he was answering the call that God had placed on his heart.
Now, Todd, it opens on the 18th. Is it going to stay in theaters, or is it a special event, one night only, and people should circle the 18th?
No, it's actually the 22nd, and it's
good.
wide.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, it's wide everywhere. And what I would encourage folks to do is the studios, and God bless Angel for getting this right. The studios have abdicated this space, the adult drama. I made a movie for people who love movies. And these are the kind of movies that used to be out there. This is like a Chariots of Fire. This is like a Man for All Seasons. This is a movie for grown-ups that gets you to wrestle with issues of the day. And it's not a period piece. This is, Hugh, I really want to underline this. I went out of my way to not make a period piece because I find period pieces tend to feel like going to a museum. Like you're looking at the story and it's behind a velvet rope and you can't get to it. You can't interact with the characters. But the fact is, for Dietrich and his compatriots, they were the most modern people of all time when they were alive. And every day was an emergency as their country was being stolen from them underneath their feet. It was always life and death. That's as modern as you can be. So this movie is propulsive. It grabs you, it pulls you in. And it's, I keep saying about Dietrich that, yes, of course, he was a man for all time. But really, he was a man for our time.
Yeah, now, what's interesting, Todd, I had checked my local distribution before I came on, and it said the K Street Theaters under the bridge in Georgetown and the Swamp Fox Theaters in Alexandria on the 18th. So I want to make sure, and that I had misinformation, fake news. It's being open on the 22nd. I want people to know so they can go out and see it on the first weekend. Was it next Thursday night?
Friday night, the 22nd, or Friday afternoon. That's the official opening day. Some theaters, because those screens have sold out, have come back 2 days to as early as the 20th. What the 18th is that there's a special sneak preview for AMC members where the movie is screening. So
That's
you're
what I
not
am.
wrong.
You've just discovered me. I'm an AMC guy. I don't want to make every other theater upset, but I'm an AMC guy. Todd, a couple of quick points. How long did it take to film this thing? Because it looks from the trailer like you went everywhere, man, and you went in the snow.
Yeah, we went everywhere. 43 days we had. And what makes this movie even more authentic is that every single frame of this film was shot on location. So there's no stages built, there's nothing artificial. This is all real. And we had extraordinary location scouts both in Belgium and in Ireland. And that makes the difference because so much of Europe and Belgium looks exactly like World War II era Germany. So we had that authenticity, and the camera captures that. I have the extraordinary John Matheson as my cinematographer. John has been nominated for 2 Oscars, and actually on November 22nd, he's going to be competing against himself. He shot Gladiator 2. He made my movie, and then he went and made Gladiator 2. So you can have a double Matheson. It's Matheson versus Matheson the weekend of the 22nd.
Well, you're opening up again. That's a big, but it's bloody. And there's some people don't like bloody. They want to be inspired by the true story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Todd Carmanicki. I very much appreciate your putting the effort into this. I will be there. I will see it. And good luck to you on the 22nd. And everyone start making plans. Go see Bonhoeffer. Take your younger people with you. Get them the story. It's a story that changes lives every year. And now this movie is going to change lives more directly and impactfully. Thank you, Todd. I want to give you, you're welcome. I want to give you a bit of news items this morning because I'm kind of stunned by this. 35 people were killed and dozens injured when a man plowed a car into a crowd at a sports stadium in southern China, police said Tuesday. It is the latest in a string of violent acts that prompted leader Xi, the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, to publicly urge authorities to get conflicts and disputes under control. The fact that Xi urged resolution of conflicts in his statement reflects Beijing's concern that public resentment over the economic uncertainty will take a violent turn. The central leadership routinely issues statements in incidents with high casualties, such as mining disasters or plane crashes. Deliberate acts like the one in Zhuhai, however, touch on what Beijing fears most: social instability that could put into question the Chinese Communist Party's dictatorial control. I wanted you to know that. Let me also tell you about AndrewandTodd.com, great sponsor of our show. And I want to spend a minute here. We're going to have a boom. All right. The Trump era is a boom. It's going to be a big boom. And that means we're going to get back to building houses, and the housing supply will increase, but it's going to take a couple of years. The Department of Interior has got to direct the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, get the hell out of the way. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers got to issue their 404 permits. The EPA's got to step back and stop the elevation process. This is all bureaucrat speak, by the way. These are the federal obstacles to building houses. But we're going to build houses again. Making America great again. We're going to build houses again. And boy, I'm waiting for the DOI appointment. Please, 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 Department of the Interior, have someone with a steel spine. And you bring in people as your solicitor, as your chief of staff, as your head of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Reclamation, and you tell them bring over the Army Corps of Engineers with Pete Hegseth, and we're going to have a come to you know what meeting, and Lee Zeldin's going to bring over the people in what do they call it? Region 9 in California and Region 1, wherever that is, and all the regional directors, and we're going to say, you're out of a job unless your docket is cleared a permit application. So the houses are coming. Can you buy one? I was so happy to see the Electronic Payments Coalition back as my sponsor because, I love these guys. GuardYourCard.com, maybe the most effective slogan I've heard in years. Richard Hunt is the executive director of the GuardYourCard.com effort with the electronic payments. Richard, I got to tell you a story. I was out on the campaign trail with Bernie Moreno. Dr. Marshall showed up from Kansas, and I took him aside and I said, "Take your hands off my card. I like my points." He said, "Oh, no, it's not what you think." I said, "No, really, just leave it alone. What are you doing?" So how goes the effort to save consumers their points?
Yeah, look, here we go. Dick Durbin, once again, will have a hearing next week. Look, as you know, Dick Durbin has lost his gavel of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He and Roger Marshall are going to have one last attempt in December. They're going to try and attach their bill onto the CR as our guest, since they cannot get the votes. Next year, they're going to try one last time to do it. Look, we've been calling this the Dick Durbin, Roger Marshall political retribution tour. If you oppose his piece of legislation, they're going to stick the United States government after you. Hugh, the Department of Justice, Department of Transportation, Elizabeth Warren's CFPB have all gone after credit cards, all because we oppose his bill. This has got to stop. We feel very good about where we are, but look, Dick Durbin, Roger Marshall are going to try one more time this year to try and have price controls and have the United States government in control of your credit card. We saw what happened in 2010 on debit cards. They did price controls on debit cards, and you know what happened? Kiss your reward points goodbye on debit cards, and now they're trying to do the same thing on credit cards.
Now, I got to tell you, Richard, I like Dr. Marshall a lot. Right? He's a good guy, but he's just wrong. There's a difference between rotten and wrong. Durbin's both,
right?
And Marshall's just wrong. So I took aside key staffer for Senator Marshall. I said, "What are you guys up to? This is nuts." He said, "Oh, they just oversell it. Nothing happened when Europe did this." And I said, "I don't care about Europe. Just leave the market alone." What is their answer to that?
Yeah, look, community banks, credit unions, large banks, airlines, airports, small businesses, millions of small businesses are on our side. They're doing the bidding of Kroger and Walmart and Target. That's the bottom line. Target and Walmart don't like to have to pay for service they get from taking a credit card. Look, when I go to Walmart and I buy a gallon of milk or I get my tires changed, I expect to pay for that service. Here is the credit card, which is the envy of the world, which is safe and secure, free of fraud. It's a service we provide to Walmart and to Target. They don't want to pay for it. That's the bottom line. They're trying to save a penny. But look, you're a national security guy. We move heaven and earth to make sure your transaction is safe from fraud. If it goes to a less secure network system, you know what is going to happen. Your credit card will not be nearly as safe or secure.
Now, does it matter who wins the Senate majority today? I can't, Dr. Marshall, I didn't have enough time. I'm going to persuade him. This is just poison. It's poison for the conservative movement because it's anti-free market and anti-choice, and it hits people in their points. And I don't know why Dr. Marshall's involved, but I'm going to go whoever wins. I know these guys. I'm going to say, kill this bill. Do you think you've got all three of them on your side?
I think all three of those people are against the government control of the payment system. They're against the government being weaponized against American companies. Those three, I know that for sure. We'll see what happens today. But the Republican Party, I know, and even many Democrats are against the United States government controlling our payment system.
Amen. GuardYourCard.com. I think I've asked you this before, Richard. Who came up with that? Because that's maybe the best slogan to stop a bill I've ever heard, GuardYourCard.com.
Oh, look, it's a great team effort to do that because it is so important that you guard your card against the United States government, against Dick Durbin, and against Roger Marshall's efforts. We've had millions of letters go into the United States Congress telling senators, especially, hands off my wallet through the Guard Your Card campaign.
And, I just think it's the easiest. I made it to him in like 1 minute. I said, nobody I know asked for this. Nobody I know wants their points messed around with. Nobody I know asks the government to come in and change anything. Why are Republicans doing this? And I think you will win, Richard Hunt. And the lame duck is a dangerous time, right? It's a dangerous time.
Yeah, it is. Look, we have bipartisan opposition. And you have to remember, Hugh, Millions of Americans are about to use their points to go home and see their loved ones for the holidays. 15 million people last year used their cards, their reward points, to go home. And the most valuable feature to many Americans are cash back. People want to use their cash back around the holiday season to pay for the great gifts they want to give to their children and to their parents. So why would you want to have a bill that would get rid of reward points, get rid of cash back? You know how high grocery prices are today. You know how high gasoline prices are today. So we have to make sure we can do everything we can to make sure consumers of all income can take advantage of the points and the cashback rewards they have accumulated.
GuardYourCard.com. And if you know Dick Durbin's involved, you know it's a bad idea. You know, there's a story today that he's too old to handle judiciary and they want to get him out. It's just Dick Durbin's been there since dirt. And he's got bad idea after bad idea. This is the worst. GuardYourCard.com, GuardYourCard.com. Richard, thank you, my friend. I'd do it for free, but don't tell the network. All right? I really would. I hate this bill. Thank you, my friend.